All right, everybody, I want to welcome you. It is Tuesday night at 7 o'clock, and it is time for another weekly episode of Conversations with Commodores. And I'm so pleased that I've got a former teammate, a kicker who I held for many, many years ago, one of the few who did not, I want to repeat, did not kick my hand at all. We've got coming out of Nashville, Jeff Owen. Jeff, good evening. Thank you, bud, for having some time tonight. How's your
Oh,
work?
it's good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, this is a labor of love for me. This is something that I've been doing for about 4.5 years now, and we are telling the oral history of the Vanderbilt football program, one player, one coach, one cheerleader at a time. And I'm so glad that we've got Jeff, who came in, I want to say the fall of '89. Is that right?
Actually, it was the fall of '88.
Fall of eight. Okay, so we played together for 2 years. You played under Watson, then you played under DiNardo. And before we get into what a kicker's perspective was for both coaches, because it was vastly different, catch up, folks, real quick about the current version. I know you've got three grown kids, a lovely wife. Everybody's kind of doing their thing. But for folks who hadn't seen you since college, give them like the 2 minute caption of Jeff Owen these days.
Oh, well, there's not a whole lot to say, but I still live in Nashville. Very fortunate. I'm almost considered a relic because I didn't transplant. But so I met my wife at Vanderbilt my freshman year. We ended up getting married. We have three children. Corinne's 27. She actually graduated from Vanderbilt in 2019. My son Montgomery graduated from Washington and Lee, and he's 25. He lives in New York City. And my youngest son Haynes is a senior, graduating in a couple of weeks from the University of Georgia, and he's 22. So we make our home here in Nashville. I actually worked for a company for 30 years, and really I was introduced to the company through the internship at Vanderbilt and through football. So I have a lot to owe football and Vanderbilt for what I would consider a really fortunate career. So I started with a company located here in Nashville called Dollar General, and they wanted to start a management training program. So I joined the company after I graduated from Vanderbilt in 1993 was or excuse me, 1992. And I stayed there, ended up working for the company for almost 30 years. And I started out as working in the stores, doing every odd job. And then I spent over 30 years at the company, worked every job in the entire company. And I finally, when I left in October, and I was the CEO of the company. So it was pretty cool, the growth of the company. When I joined Dollar General in 1992, we had 1,400 stores and $600 million in revenue. And when I left in October, we had over $40 billion in revenue, and we just opened our 20,000 store right at the end of the year. So really part of a great team that was able to really find a way to grow that company. So I'm very excited about the next chapter, about giving back and enjoying freedom and flexibility right now. I really enjoy that. I haven't had much of it in the last 30 years. So that's kind of where we are today, and excited about what might come for the next 20 years.
Well, I tell you, the congrats on your career. Congrats on making your way all the way up the ladder to where you got, and congrats on the retirement and where you are right now in life. I hope you're enjoying some of that newfound freedoms that you have not had in the last 30 years or so. Um, but Jeff, I gotta back up for two comments. One, between the two of us, we cover most of the SEC with kids, and we the commonality is we both have a Georgia or soon to be a Georgia grad. I have a Georgia grad, and it kind of pains me a little bit, but I'm very proud of what she's doing. I look past the degree that we ended up paying for. But anyway, The key thing that I heard that you said that was awesome, and we're going to come back to that in a little while, is that you went through your contacts at Vanderbilt through either football or the internship or the combination of it. And that's what I think is just so awesome about what you were able to do in networking. A lot of guys, Jeff, who we play with, and it doesn't matter what years that they were there, they kind of fit in one of two camps in my eyes, having done almost 200 of these conversations. There are lots and lots of folks, and this is not a criticism at all, guys. This is just an observation. There are guys who are comfortable in the McGugan bubble. They stay with their friends, they deal with just the athletes. That's their comfort zone, and that's enough for them. Then you have others who get outside of that. They network, they go into maybe a fraternity or sorority if they're women, or they just figure out friends or make friends in the population who are not part of the athlete's life. And that's kind of the two tracks that I see, and some cross. Don't. I'm not trying to put everybody in one camp or the other, but it's what you do during your 4 or 5, and sometimes people are there 6 years on campus makes all the difference, I think, in the world for after you when you leave school. Because not very many guys come in and just have it all laid out, go get your degree, come back and start working for the family business. Jeff, I want to, I guess since we're here, how did you know about this internship? When did it pop up? What year were you in school when you were made aware of it? Kind of share a little bit of that, the genesis of how you got onto that track.
Well, I think it really had everything to do with the HOD major at Vanderbilt. And I came to Vanderbilt because it's a very well respected school and it played football in the SEC. And quite honestly, at the time, Eric Jones and Boo Mitchell and Watson, I mean, they were on the up and up, and I wanted to be a part of that. But I came to Vanderbilt primarily for football and the prestige of the school. I really didn't research as much as I probably should have the majors that were offered. And so when I actually accepted my scholarship and really got into that, I realized they had this outstanding major, I thought, which was human and organizational development. And HOD requires you, at least at the time, I'm not even sure it does now, but at the time it required you to do a practicum or an internship. And so I wish I could take credit for it, but I can't. It was really the curriculum. And quite honestly, we sometimes are surprised at how many folks are aware of Vanderbilt athletes or Vanderbilt athletics and really want them to be a part of their organization. And this was no different. I got the opportunity. They were familiar with Vanderbilt, of course. The founder and CEO of the company was familiar with football and had seen kind of what we had accomplished a little bit as a team and wanted a part of that. Really wanted someone who had understood teamwork, understood the grind that it takes to be part of the student athlete program. And so it was pretty easy to get the internship because, quite honestly, they'd never had one before. So you can imagine it wasn't as smooth as it probably is now. I can say I was very committed to the internship program before I left because of what it had done for me. But I have everything to attribute to the HOD major and quite frankly, the coaches giving me the opportunity to do it as well and pushing me towards that. And little did I know it would turn into a job. That's not why I did it. And little did I know it would turn into a career. I certainly didn't expect that, but it all worked out. And I can say that, there's a lot more to Vanderbilt than just the football, just the friends you make, but the long lasting connections and the opportunities you have in that Vanderbilt degree. That is something that is incredibly well regarded. And it seems like it gets even better and better as time goes by. Just certainly glad I'm not trying to get into Vanderbilt today.
Yeah, me too. One thing you may not be aware of, I realized that Watson and the coaches were recruiting you, but you may not have known that I was in the stands for a couple of your games to watch you kick because they wanted my opinion to see if I could actually hold for a kicker of your style. So once I gave them the thumbs up, my friend, it came down to the holder.
Well,
I don't
thank
know if
you.
you were aware of that, but you had my blessing and things seem to have worked out. So you need to put that away for the future whenever you have some Vanderbilt related talks coming up. I just throw that out there.
Love it.
Well, what was life as a kid growing up in Nashville and matriculating through MBA and having the Vanderbilt campus really at your back door? What was your childhood like from that standpoint?
Well, actually, a lot of folks think I grew up here, and I actually didn't. I moved around a lot with my father's job, and so I was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and it's ironically, my wife and I were both born in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and our parents actually knew each other, excuse me, didn't know each other, but lived in the same apartment building for a brief period of time. We found that out later on, but and then we moved to Miami, then to Roanoke, Virginia, then to Atlanta, and then finally to Nashville when I was a sophomore in high school. And so you can imagine I've lived a lot of different places, but it's really ironic that I've been in one place since we moved to Nashville in 1986. And so being a sophomore, I went to MBA, and then I really did not expect to go to Vanderbilt. And quite honestly, you know, I've talked about this before, but my family history, I have a lot of family that went to Ole Miss. In fact, my wife and I are the only two that did not go to Ole Miss. My father played for their 63 national championship team, and my brother was the all-time leading scorer in Ole Miss football history for a period of time and a member of their all-century football team. So he was a field goal kicker down there. And so I had a lot of history there. But it wasn't the place for me. They didn't want me to come there. They weren't interested in me. And once I committed to Vanderbilt, they changed their tune. But I was very, very happy with the decision that I had made. And so, you know, when I went to Vanderbilt, it was like going to a whole different universe. I mean, I never saw people that I went to high school with. In fact, my mom and dad, I didn't see them very often either, except for football games, which I think surprised them. It got to a point where I didn't see them so much, where they would give me a small allowance, and they would require me to come to the first Sunday of every month to church at the 8:30 service to pick up my allowance. And if I didn't show up, they put it in the offering plate. Well, I wasn't going to miss that allowance. I needed that money. And so I showed up one service, having stayed up till probably 4 or 5 in the morning. And when I showed up, they saw me, smelled me, and everything. And then so we changed that after that, because they were like, "You're not coming to church like that again." And I'm like, "Well, I had to come. I needed that money." Yeah. So anyway, but it was like going to a whole different world. We went to different places, and at the end of the day, you know, I felt like Vanderbilt, I was as far away from home as I could have been if I'd gone to any other college. And then obviously today, as you can imagine, Nashville's not nearly the town that it was when we all went to college. So I've just been fortunate to be a part of a community that continues to evolve and change, and it's really fun to watch it grow.
It's interesting you just mentioned that. When we were in school, I want you to describe what was downtown like. Not now, not the growth. What was it like in 1988 downtown?
Oh my goodness, there was no downtown. I mean, no, it was a ghost town.
Yeah.
And nobody, it's so interesting because so many Vanderbilt students I'm hearing now, they live downtown.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to go downtown, you could, but there wasn't anything to do. It shut down. And it was just truly remarkable that I never would have bet any money that town would have been transformed into what it is today. I think everything kind of changed, quite frankly, when it was a very controversial decision, but the current mayor at the time decided to build the Bridgestone Arena, and we didn't have a team. We didn't have. There was like, what is the need for an arena? And fast forward to today, obviously we have an NHL professional team, and we also I was told recently that Bridgestone Arena is like one of the top 4 or 5 most sought after and utilized arenas in the entire country.
Wow.
And so it kind of was the jump start for, of course, then the Titans came, and then all that just kind of put us on a whole different level. But still, when unless you have been inside the walls of the Vanderbilt campus, you really don't get appreciation of what it is. But life on West End was pretty good. And even though my house was only about 4 or 5 miles away, it felt like it was about 500 miles away. And my parents were really nice about making sure that they didn't expect me to come home too much.
It's so true. My daughter went to college across town in Birmingham. I never saw her. It's maybe that was maybe for your experience and for her experience, you wanted that campus away from home experience. And if you run home too much to do laundry or whatever, it's not the same independence, if you will. But Jeff, you're so right about downtown as well. I remember Printer's Alley was obviously down there. There was one of the years, I don't know if it was during your years or before you got to the team, we stayed downtown one year at one of the hotels. And frankly, we were advised don't walk too far away from the property itself. But now we know it's the circus comes to town as crazy and as busy it is as it is. Jeff, were there other schools that you had considered? I know that Vanderbilt is where you ended up, but were there other schools that either wanted you to walk on or had made you an offer?
Yes, there were. I can't say I was a super highly recruited player, but I had opportunities to go to Georgia Tech, Arkansas, and Rutgers, believe it or not, and then also Kentucky, um, and obvious where I kind of thought I'd end up was Ole Miss, and it was really interesting to not ever hear from them, which, as it turns out, my father likes to remind me it was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. And he's right, because I got to go to a school that fit me much better, quite frankly, than I think Ole Miss would have. I mean, I'm sure I would have had fun down there. But I met my wife, I met my future employer, and I've made lifelong friends. And so he likes to remind me how lucky I am that Ole Miss didn't want me.
Mm-hmm.
And you never not want to be wanted, of course, but as it turns out, it was a perfect fit for me. So there was really quite honestly, Vanderbilt was by far and away the best opportunity I had, and it was a pretty easy choice.
But it's so, and when we get to be that age, when we're seniors or juniors, and we commit to whatever school that we really think is going to be our school we're going to sign with, sometimes it's left up to the student themselves. A lot of times it's family decisions or however it is they get to that decision. Was this largely left up to you where you ended up going, or was it a family decision, or how did that unfold? Because you had other options clearly, um, with Ole Miss being what you thought to be your first choice, but that was not the path for you ultimately.
Oh, it was absolutely my choice. My parents were fantastic about kind of having us step up and really take responsibility for many things, this being one of them. And, they wanted me to go where I felt like I would fit the best. And so they were completely supportive. Of course, I consulted with them along with plenty of other people, my brother included, both brothers that I have, my high school football coach. And so, again, it for me at least, it was an easy decision. It really was, because Vanderbilt far and away was the best opportunity I felt that I had,
Mhm.
and it was the best school I felt that I had the opportunity to attend, and so it was. I mean, I can remember it was early December when I made the decision to commit to Vanderbilt, and then Ole Miss came coming back to me a couple of weeks later,
Mhm.
and I just said, look, I was raised where when you make a commitment, or if you give your word to somebody, it's your bond. And so no, I'm not interested in whatever you have to say, because you had plenty of time to come and show your interest, and you chose not to. So I'm ready to move on, and I'm really excited to be a Commodore, and I still am to this day. It was the greatest blessing I've ever received, and I'm so grateful and thankful that I had the opportunity to go to Vanderbilt.
Your story that you just shared, that once you committed, word got out, and then another school or other schools come calling. That is such a theme that I hear each week, that the coaching staff at whatever other school it is, who may not have given you the time of day, even though you let them know you're interested, all of a sudden it's like the girl picks one guy and then the other guy but their loss, our gain. Now, Vanderbilt has had a history of a pipeline of NBA kids coming over to campus and contributing and playing. Were there any NBA guys on the roster at the time, or were you aware of that? Did that have any impact on you?
No, not really. No. Um, I what had a lot of impact on me was, I mean, back in those days, it was really exciting down on West End. I mean, Eric Jones and Boo Mitchell
Mhm.
and many, many other players. I mean, I don't mean to leave anyone out, but I mean, Vanderbilt was on the rise, and obviously we had not won a ton of games, but they kept progressing, and quite frankly, I thought we were on the cusp of something really special.
Mhm.
And I think, football games have 4 or 5, 6, 8 plays that determine the outcome. And I think there were some things that could have gone our way, and who knows? Because my freshman year, getting to kind of see some of those players play was outstanding. And still, I'm in awe with some of the athletic talent that we had on our team, and quite honestly, it was going down there on Saturdays and seeing the excitement down there, and that was something I wanted to be a part of.
Well, it's you get to campus in the fall of '88. Were any other new kickers? Did anybody else come in with your class?
Yeah, we had several kickers. We had, let's see, David Lawrence and Rob Chur were both there when I was there. Johnny Clark was the incumbent,
Mhm.
and I knew Johnny before I ever showed up because he and my brother competed and recruited together. So I had a little bit of knowledge there, um, and of course, the Gaines brothers were I mean, they're still world renowned in a lot of circles. So I was kind of starstruck by the size of the players, and one of the things I'll tell you was interesting. I don't know if it was a benefit or a curse, but I got to work out the summer before I showed up, much much earlier than anybody else, because I was here local. And
Mhm.
Coach Brad Bates brought me in the first day to work out, and I did the first workout, and I was pretty pleased with how I was able to do the entire workout, complete it, do all the things he wanted me to do. I'm not sure I lifted the weight he wanted me to do, but I didn't puke. How's that? And so I
Win,
came
check.
well, I came home, and I was like, wow, okay, this isn't as hard as I thought.
Mhm.
And the next morning I got up and I went downstairs and I went to eat some oatmeal or cereal or something. and I literally could not bend my arms to put the food in my mouth. And my mom was like, "What is wrong with you?" And I'm like, I don't know what's wrong with me. But anyway, I quickly learned the difference between high school weight programs and SEC weight programs. And so I was fortunate not only to get to kind of maybe get a little bit of a jump start, but also get to meet some of the more senior players. So when I showed up on campus with everyone else, I had a little bit. The transition wasn't quite as hard as it would have been had I come from somewhere else. But wow, the transition from high school to college was a lot more difficult than I was expecting.
Oh, it always is. And for those of you who are just joining us, I've got Jeff Owen. Jeff came to campus to kick for us in 1988 and has recently retired as formerly the CEO at Dollar General. He still lives in the Nashville area, and we're just kind of going through those awesome years in the late 80s. And Jeff, when you and Rob Chura came in, and Rob's been on the show, your kicking styles, your personalities, everything about the two of you could not have been more at contrast. And I mean that in a great way because I considered you guys both great friends back in the day and still do. But Rob spoke Russian. He was from St. Louis. He was barefooted. He could, I mean, there was just so many awesome things about Rob that were just unique to him. And here's my question. You guys perform the same sport, the same position, but were you able to relate to each other at all because of just how different you guys were?
Well, I mean, yes. I mean, I we had competed against each other at camps, and back those days, let's be real. If you're a kicker, I mean, there's not a lot of kicking camps. I mean, a kicker kind of hangs out down on the end of the bench, and I mean, nobody really wants to hang out with the kicker. So we kind of all hung out together. The kickers, the trainers, the managers, just people getting out of the way. And so yeah, so we certainly did. I mean, I will say we both wanted to be the kicker for the team, no doubt. And we had a pretty healthy competition regarding that. But at the end of the day, I think we both found a way to contribute to the team, and certainly had a great time while we were there. And but as you well know, I mean, kickers are, they're a necessary evil on a football team.
They're a fickle bunch, particularly when they're in high school and college. Your senior year in high school, my sophomore year at Vanderbilt, we were 4-7, and this is the up and coming what you were talking about. Eric Jones had a breakout year. Boo Mitchell had a whole bunch of guys do some great things. Chris Gaines tackled anything that moved, and it really looked like we were on the rise. When you get to us in the fall of '88, we actually took a step back and ended up 3-8. Then we had successes, as you know, 1-10 seasons before DiNardo shows up. We all have that confidence as an athlete in whatever our sport, whatever our specialty is. And I know that with at least my understanding with kickers, if you miss, you have to just forget about your misses. You have to concentrate on what's the next kick and make your corrections. What kind of level of confidence coming out of high school did you have from an athletic standpoint? And were you able to maintain that when you got to campus? Because now you're competing against clearly very good competition. How did you keep that confidence through that time?
Well, one of the things people, I get that question a lot, is like, wow, when you go out as a kicker, everybody, you're out there and everybody's watching you and what have you, and you really just for me at least, the confidence came from, first of all, I saw how successful my brother was, and I felt like we were very close. We're similar in stature, similar in attitude, and so I was like, wow, if he can do it, I think I can probably do it too. I was able to do that in high school, and then I had a lot of teammates that appreciated, or at least gave me the confidence to go out there and not worry about the consequences. Because at least for me, when you're a kicker, one of the things that at least I held as a high burden is the fact that I understand I didn't do all the drills they did. But I can come down. The game can come down to whether or not I perform, and I felt that as a huge burden because when you have someone who's played 75 snaps or 60 snaps and realize, from a kicker standpoint, you don't do a whole lot. And so you need to deliver. And so to me, that was my motivating factor was, I wanted to earn the respect of my teammates, even though I didn't necessarily do all the things they did. And quite honestly, several of them would try to kick a football, and it's not as easy as it looks. And so I just wanted to make sure that I was someone the team could count on, that when they needed something to happen, they had the confidence in me. And to do that, you certainly got to go out there. You trust your mechanics. You know what you need to do. But at the end of the day, you got to go out there and embrace the moment and be excited about I thought it was awesome when you're out there and you got a huge crowd or what have you, and there's something important on the line. That motivated me. It didn't scare me. And I was fortunate that to not have that, because there's some folks that do have that apprehension. I didn't have it.
Mm-hmm. And this is kind of getting into the weeds a little bit, but had we already transitioned away from the kicking tee by the time you got to campus?
No. When
You
I
still
was,
had?
that happened, it was interesting. I finally earned the starting role. I think it was early on in my junior year.
Mm-hmm.
And then was able to, I'm sorry, that was, let's see, the tee was taken away, I think, in my senior year. I think they did two things that year. They took the tee away and they shrunk the goalpost by 6 feet. And so the goalpost went from 24 feet to 18 feet. And so those two changes were huge. But I would say that the tee was less of an issue. It just required you to kind of approach it a little bit differently, but you had to kind of figure it out. But the goalpost being 6 feet narrower, that was hard, because I've tell people this. When you think about it, the goalposts in college are the same width as they are in the NFL. The difference between the NFL and the college today is college has wider hash marks. So actually, you could argue that kicking in college today is more difficult than it is as it is in the NFL because of the hash marks. But what I would tell you today, the people that kick footballs today, they're kind of like the students that go to college today. They are so much better than I'm just glad I got in and I got out when I did.
Well, it's almost comical if you look at where goalposts were for college in the 70s and early 80s, about how wide the goalposts were. And then they shrink by about what, a fourth or whatever it was uh, during your latter years there. That's a huge difference. But anyway, guys, I've got Jeff Owen. He kicked for us in the 80s, early 90s. And I want to get away from the field for a few minutes, Jeff, and I want to talk about academic life. I want to talk about social life. We're so regimented. When you play D1 sports, particularly football in the SEC, you'd better have a regiment. You'd better have a schedule to stay on task, or you're not going to be at your school, particularly at Vanderbilt, very long. What was your transition like to get on task, to make sure you got your rest, to make sure you got your studies in? Was that an easy transition that you had already kind of developed in high school, or was it one you found the hard way your first year or so while at school?
Well, there are a lot more temptations. So I found it probably a little more difficult than probably I anticipated. But um, I think one of the things that was made very clear is you got to go to class, you got to make your grades, or you're not going to play. So that was pretty clear to me. Um, and I was fortunate. I mean, my high school kind of early on kind of helped shape a discipline around studying, and I, believe it or not, I enjoyed a lot of the classes that I had, and the people I went to class with. So, but the social side was pretty awesome, and so that was probably a little more difficult to say no to certain things, because it inevitably, oh, you can do it next week, or you'd have friends that didn't have class the next day or whatever, and the temptation to go do something with them was a lot more than I expected. And by the way, I went to my high school was a all male high school, so now having females in the class, that was another adjustment. So all that was a little harder than I thought, but thankfully I kind of settled in. And then as I got older, the other thing that at least Donardo did, he instituted mandatory study halls and stuff, regardless of your grades. And so then you had to earn your way out of it, and so that was a super incentive for me, because I sure as hell didn't want to go to study hall at 6 in the morning and then at 8 p.m. or 7 p.m. after practice ended. So that was another reason to get my grades up so I could get the heck out of that.
That'd be enough incentive for a lot of folks, I would assume. Jeff, from a physical standpoint, your stature, you're not the size of the average NFL, I mean, Vanderbilt linebacker. You're not one of these big dudes who immediately stand out when you're sitting in an art history class with all the, 100 other students. Did you find, was that an advantage for you? Was it a disadvantage? Did people assume or did not assume that you played sports? I don't know if you wore any of the Kelly garb, the nasty, stuff that we were issued to class, or if you put on a collared shirt or not. But I guess what I'm asking is about blending in with the regular students. And did folks know that you play?
Oh no. I mean, I didn't even blend in with the students. I mean, I'm super small, and don't look like an athlete or a football player for that matter. And so even to this day, when someone, for whatever reason, I might get introduced to someone, and I don't know about you, but they still bring up Vanderbilt football, and they'll say, "Oh, Jeff played football at Vanderbilt," and I love the looks on people's faces when they say that. And so I quickly make sure that they understand what position I played. I can tell you a funny story. I was actually in the mall one Saturday, and I ran into the chancellor at the time, Gordon Gee, and Vanderbilt was playing Florida away. We weren't playing. We were getting killed, and he was so frustrated. I go, I understand. He goes, why are you so into the football? And I said, well, I actually played football at Vanderbilt. And he's like, what? And I'm like, I said, well, I was a field goal kicker for Vanderbilt. And he kind of had this huge exhale. And, but, you know, actually, for me at least, it was kind of nice because you could kind of just blend in, and you didn't have to deal with all the stuff that I'm sure some of the more well-known football players did. I mean, I was lucky enough just to get allowed into the locker room by Kelly and Luke and all those guys. They barely let me in the locker room on a regular basis.
Yeah, what was it that they used to say? Not about just you, but in general, kickers aren't football players. They're just, they're just on the roster. You guys, you go in this corner, but
Right.
yeah, I know. And you'd end up losing the footballs or damaging them somehow, or the air would be out. It's always the kicker's fault for whatever it may be.
Yep.
Jeff, let's go back. We've got a little bit of time left. Let's go back on the field and talk about playing time. Let's talk about traveling. And more specifically, I guess one of the games that I want to talk about, and we don't have to stay on it too long, but it's it's, I'm sure, made an impression on you like it did me, and that's the 1989 game at Ole Miss, the Chucky Mullins game. And to kind of set the stage for those who don't know, and Jeff, you chime in here. We was in the first quarter. John Gromos led us down the field. We were getting set up to hopefully score, but we stalled out on third down. He threw a pass to Brad Gaines. Brad jumped up and caught it. Unfortunately, Chucky took a bad angle, and we know what happened after that. But we were going to kick a field goal because we were in the red zone. It wasn't called that at the time, but we were inside or around the 20. And no one knew that Chucky was hurt as to the extent that he was. So we go out there, and time just seems to freeze right there. Do you remember this series of events? I know that Johnny was our kicker that game, but do you remember this game? Do you remember what you felt or remember from them?
Well, I guess I can bring this up. But at the time we were thin. I mean, this is a whole can of worms. I can't believe I'm opening it up. But I actually was doing some of the punting at the time because Johnny was a kicker, and then we were thin at receiver. So I was pretty fast, I guess, and they asked me. So I was a reserve backup receiver, believe it or not, and so my roommate was Brad on that particular trip. So I'm very familiar with it. I actually got in the game as a receiver that particular game. So I'm very, very familiar with the whole situation. And for Vanderbilt's sake, it was a good thing that I didn't have to play receiver long. But we were pretty thin with injuries and stuff. And I'll never forget that play. I'll never forget the day. I'll never forget the game. I'll never forget the impact that it had on our team, on their team. I'll never forget the response, more importantly, of everyone 2 and 3 and 4 weeks after the incident. The fact that Ole Miss built a home for him, the fact that President Bush came to visit him, and then to this day, I mean, I'm sure you know this, but some may not. Every time Ole Miss goes out on the field, they have a bust of Chucky Mullins that they touch, and then their spring football award winner wears the number 38. Yeah. And so I just think the humanity of the SEC of the United States, quite frankly, was on full display. And I think I have so much respect for how we all responded. And honestly, I'm in awe of how Brad Gaines continues to respond. And I've kept in touch with Brad, and he goes there every single year, and it really changed. I'm sure you've talked. It changed him, not only his outlook on football, but it also changed him just as a person. And to this day, obviously, I regret that ever happened, but I think if there's one thing to take away that's a positive, was I think Chucky Mullins had an impact bigger on humanity in the United States than he ever would have otherwise. So his certain tragedy didn't go in vain.
You're so right, Jeff. It's Brad's been on the show. Brad has talked openly about the game and its impact and so forth. He was on with us last year, and I remember the fundraisers in the stadiums throughout the rest of the year. And it's true. His impact on humanity and society as a whole was far greater than probably any sports related accomplishments he could have ever have achieved. But sometimes, and we never know this to happen, things occur in sports, in a sports game that we may be participating in, that just transcend the game and stick with us. And we don't have to stay here very long, but I just remember us being teammates at that time. I did not recall that you and Brad were rooming on the road at that time. I do remember you playing backup receiver. And speaking of a coach who was with us that day, Coach Gary Shepard says to tell you hello.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you very much. That's That's a blast from the past. I love that.
Yeah, we've got, let's see, we've got some other Commodores from different years. Tyler Unzicker. We got my man OJ Fleming. We got Coach Gene Wyndham are in the house with us this evening, guys. We've got Jeff Owen tonight with us as our guest. Jeff, let's stay on the field. We'll go away from that game and that part of our lives. But what was it about playing football at Vanderbilt that gave you the most joy? What was it that when you look back at your time that maybe gives you a smile, or maybe you shared a story that now your kids roll their eyes because they've heard it so many times, that really is a good moment for you from a football standpoint?
Well, I tell you what, just the friends I made, obviously, I think that's number one. But like to get specific, my senior year was awesome. Donardo had come in. He came and brought a really different style. He, in my opinion, elevated a lot of what at least I experienced. He brought us over to his house as seniors in the summer, which I had never done before. Seniors sat in first class on the trips, the away trips. He really put a lot on the seniors, and I happened to be one. So I was fortunate to be a part of that, and we had success. I mean, we were 5-5 when we went to the Tennessee game. Back then, you only played 11 games.
Yeah.
And we had some really cool wins. I'd like to think that we should have beaten Auburn. That would have been great. I actually missed a field goal to win the game. So that wasn't a great moment, but it was a pretty cool. By the way, had the goalpost been a little bit wider, we wouldn't have lost that game. It was a fairly long kick, though. But then we were able to beat Georgia that year. We were able to beat Ole Miss that year,
and I want to pause you right there. How how good was that game and that feeling? A 30-27 game at Oxford, a win your senior year.
Well, that was the highlight of my probably athletic career, because as we talked about earlier, it's really fun to be able to get the opportunity to show to just show a team that didn't want you that maybe that they could have benefited from what I had to offer. But because what's cool about that is my freshman year, my older brother was a senior at Ole Miss, and we played Ole Miss in Nashville. And my brother set the all-time Ole Miss leading scoring record against Vanderbilt in that game. And so then my senior year, to get to come down there and then get to kick the field goal to win the game at Ole Miss. And I think the coolest thing about the whole day, the first person on the field to after the game was over was my older brother. He came on the field and he was so excited. And my father couldn't get over the fence. So, but it was just, I'm just really fortunate. I have a wonderful family, and the fact that he was so excited for me that day, was just incredible. But that was so cool because, we had come down, we were not expected to win, and we won the game. And then we really didn't stop there. We continued to progress from there. And so it was just really cool that senior year to be a senior. I'm not going to suggest I was part of the leadership on the team. I wasn't, but I contributed and got to be part of the senior leadership team, and just really getting to be a part of what winning feels like, tastes like. And then we went to Tennessee. We had Bull Scouts in the game in the stadium, because had we won the game, we were going to go to a bowl game, which obviously we didn't. That was a really tough game. We got killed by Tennessee.
Yeah, that was a goose egg of a game.
That was a terrible, terrible way to go out. But I would tell you that it was a great season. And quite honestly, what's really neat is I just got a text last week from Jared DiNardo, and to me, that's what's really neat is I've stayed in touch with him all these years, and so he and I went to the CMA Awards about 3 or 4 years ago together. So it was really that was quite honestly the highlight of my Vanderbilt year, and just really that senior year and the senior class we had was a lot of fun to be a part of.
Well, there was y'all had an exceptional class who came in together. But speaking of exceptional, we got one of the Keystone Cops with us tonight in the house. We got Billy Smith, says to tell you.
That's another guy I used to hang out with a lot on the sideline. See, I can remember in that, by the way, in that Ole Miss game, I got run over on a kickoff, and my finger, I severed the tendon in my hand. And so I came over, and the trainer at the time was Fred Tedeschi. Mm-hmm. And he's like looking at me. He's like, "What? Why are you acting like you're hurt?" I'm like, "Well, I'm not hurt, but my hand hurts." And he's like, "Why?" I go, "Well, did you see that guy run me over?" And he's like, "Yeah, I saw it. I mean, you could have done a little bit better." I said, "Yeah, I got that part." He said, "Well, what's wrong with you?" I said, "My hand hurts." He goes, "Well, make a fist." And I couldn't. And my finger, it was like my finger just stayed up. And he goes, "Oh my God, you have to have surgery." I'm like, "What?" And so anyway, just that was some of the drama. Mm-hmm. And then I think you'll like this story. We played at Army the next week. Mm-hmm. And I had a friend of mine at Vanderbilt whose sister was a cadet at West Point. Mm-hmm. And anyway, every time I kicked a field goal at West Point, this cadet company would cheer. It was weird. And then later on in the game, there was a field goal, and Coach DiNardo yelled for field goal, and I would put my helmet in the kicking net. I didn't wear it all the time. Mm-hmm. Well, they stole my helmet. The cadets, I mean, it was gone. Mm-hmm. And so we had to call a timeout because I couldn't find my helmet. And DiNardo did not like that, of course, you can imagine. But I borrowed someone's helmet, went out there and kicked the field goal. And so after the game, I came out of the locker room, and my friend's sister came down and with several of her cadets. And she was like, and we won the game handily. I think I kicked 3 field goals that game. And she's like, "We're so proud of you. Like, my brother told me about what happened." I'm like, "What do you mean what happened?" She goes, "Well, your hand." He said, because I had this big cast on it and all this stuff. And he's like, "He told me that you got in a car wreck and you severed part of your hand, but you're still playing in the game. And we just thought that was the bravery was so great. That's why we were cheering for you." And I'm like, I didn't sever. I got run over on a kickoff at Ole Miss, and I jammed my finger. And they started laughing, and they're like, "Oh." I said, "Did you guys steal my helmet?" And they started laughing, and they ran off. And anyway, that was a lot of fun that game, though. But I never got the helmet back.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, guys, that was a 41-10 win. That was part of, you guys beat Georgia, Ole Miss, Army, and then Kentucky in a 4-game stretch before the goose egg at Tennessee. Jeff, we have highs and lows when it comes to our athletic careers, regardless of what levels we achieve. But at some point, those careers have to come to an end. And we're at the end. And for most of us, it ends with the last game of the season, which is typically Tennessee. A few years it's been Wake Forest, but it's typically Tennessee if there's no bowl game. As you were getting toward the end of that season, did you have any aspirations, any thoughts about kicking professionally in either NFL or other leagues? Or did you know that your time was coming to a close when the season ended?
Well, I was probably like a lot of people. I had dreams. The problem is my dreams and the NFL's dreams weren't the same. They didn't really want me. But I will say, so I met my wife at Vanderbilt my freshman year. Mm-hmm. I got engaged to my wife December of my senior year. I mean, I know that's crazy. But and then we graduated both graduated in May, and then we got married in August. Okay, 3 months after graduation. Yeah. And we got married. We're still married today. What is it? 31 years. And so my internship with Dollar General, this is a great story. They offered me a full-time position and I turned it down because I was going to try to play in the pros, which again, back then it was a little easier to kind of like walk on the pros. I mean, the chances of making it were very slim, but you could at least do it. So my position coach at the time got the offensive coordinator for Coach DiNardo, ended up getting the job as the head coach of the Memphis Pharaohs of the Arena Football League. And so he was also the special teams coach while I was at Vanderbilt. So he knew me, and he offered me an opportunity to play a contract for the Memphis Pharaohs. So I came home and I was so excited. I told my wife, I said, I made it. And she's like, what? I said, I got a contract to play in the Arena Football League. She goes, what's that? I said, oh, don't worry about it. And she goes, well, do you get paid? I said, yeah. She said, so how much are you going to get paid? I said, well, he told me $700 a game. And she goes, well, how many games are there? And I said, 12. And she goes, how long's the season? I said, 8 months. And she said, she's like, how in the world are we going to live on $8,400 a year? And I'm like, that's not right. It's not 8,400. I was so just excited. And so she got the calculator out. We did the math. I'm like, what? We can't live on 80. Anyway, so I turned down the Arena Football League offer.
She made it real, didn't she?
She did. She did. And then I quickly turned towards the only job offer that I had, and that was Dollar General. And that's why I accepted the job and started.
Thankfully, that was still on the table for you.
Yes. I was very fortunate. I'm very fortunate to have had that still on the table. And so I accepted that role in the December of '92, and then stayed there for 30 years.
I guess the question begs, what took you so long to propose? If you got married in August, that's awesome.
Well, I'll tell you what.
So great.
Here was my rationale there. There's that term, outkick your coverage. And I was like, okay, I definitely have done that. So I need to kind of try to get a commitment here and sew this thing up before she has opportunities to find out there's better people out there. So I am so grateful and thankful. She's the best thing in the world, best thing I've ever happened to me. And we've been through a lot together. And there's no way I would have been able to do the things I've done without the support of her. And so now we're empty nesters. And I think the best thing about the whole thing is that we've realized we still like each other. And so that's kind of fun when you're now at home alone. We love this empty nest life that we're in now.
Well, we'll pause the parents' response to when the kids come home for too long conversation. So we've got a couple of minutes to wrap up our conversation with Jeff Owen tonight on Conversations with Commodores. But where I want to bring it home, Jeff, for our last little topic is, if I'm an up-and-coming high school sophomore, senior, junior, whatever year, and I'm looking at Vanderbilt and I want to play sports in college, how did your experience that you just beautifully went through, what parts of that would you take to share with those students who are either hopefully coming to Vanderbilt, or maybe the guys and women who are on the sports teams now? How do you take that experience, those life lessons from playing ball, from being at Vanderbilt, and utilize that so they could be better prepared for their futures?
Well, I think many of us can share the same sentiment, but I can tell you as in my business career, I always looked for people that had been part of teams. And if you, on your resume, were able to demonstrate that you could balance both the academic rigors and athletic, and you understood what it was like to be part of a team, that's someone I'm willing to take a chance on. And you all of a sudden, you catapult yourself to the top of the list. And I really don't care, or I never cared about necessarily where you went to school. But one of the things I think today, what I'm amazed is Vanderbilt has the prestige of the university continues to just escalate at an incredibly rapid rate. Mm-hmm. And the reputation of the school has continues to, in my opinion, I thought we've reached our heights, but we continue to get even higher. And I really like where we're headed as a university. I mean, to me, what I would tell somebody is that, I think it's hard to convince some people that the percentages of people that actually get to play on Sunday after college is so small. And everyone that you talk to knows that, but they think they're the one that can actually do it. And to me, it's kind of like, that's fine. But I've always been a big proponent of understanding both sides of the road. So what's the upside, and then what's the downside? Those are the guardrails of your road. And as long as you know the upside and the downside, you'll never be surprised, and you can probably navigate the car between the two. That's just how I've always been, and certainly how I was in my business career, and anticipating what that will be like. So to me, there's nothing like a team. There's nothing like getting an education that you'll never, ever, ever regret. And, that doesn't resonate with everybody. But to me, at the end of the day, whether you went to Oklahoma, Alabama, Vanderbilt, or whatever, I think even the players of today, I don't know them, but I would venture to say the people they got to play football with and the coaches they got to learn from are still the most important and the most cherished memories that they'll ever have. And that's the same at Vanderbilt, but you combine that with a world-class education, it's a pretty special place to be.
Couldn't have said it any better. And I appreciate those words, and Jeff, for you telling and sharing your story with us tonight. So my friend, it's been a while since we really connected over the years, but thank you for being with us tonight on Conversations with Commodores.
Well, thank you for doing this. I mean, this isn't easy. And the fact that you take time out of your life to connect us together, and sometimes we get to meet new people, and hopefully this will stem and maybe get to meet some folks from here on out. But listen, there are a lot of things you could be doing, and the fact that you are willing to do this for all of us, thank you so much. And thanks for having me on and letting me be a part of this.
Oh, that's as I've said many times, Jeff. First of all, thank you. It's a labor of love for me, and I enjoy connecting Commodores and meeting new friends and reconnecting with old teammates. Hang on just a second when I sign off. But guys, keep coming back. We've got a Coach Fred Pancoast era panel coming up. We've got another walk-ons panel coming up. We've got Commodores lined up from now until almost football season. So keep coming back to the Facebook group, checking in, and there's all kind of good stuff. But as always, you guys, anchor down.